So here we go. Journey to the Center of the Earth, Chapter 19 The Western Gallery, A New Route. Our descent was now resumed by means of the second gallery. Hans took up his post in front as usual. We had not gone more than 100 yards when the professor carefully examined the walls. This is the primitive formation. We are on the right road. Onwards is our hope. When the whole earth got cool in the first hours of the world's morning, the diminution of the volume of the earth produced a state of dislocation in its upper crust, followed by ruptures, crevices, and fissures. The passage was a fissure of this kind through which ages ago had flowed the eruptive granite. The thousand windings and turnings formed an inextricable labyrinth through the ancient soil. As we descended, successions of layers composing the primitive soil appeared with the utmost fidelity of detail. Geological science considered this primitive soil as the base of the mineral crust, and it recognized that it is composed of three different strata or layers, all resting on the immovable rock known as granite. No mineralogists had even found themselves placed in such a marvelous position to study nature in all her real and naked beauty. The sounding rod, a mere machine, could not bring to the surface of the earth the objects of value for the study of its internal structures, which we were about to see with our own eyes, to touch with our own hands. Remember that I am writing this after the journey. Across the streak of the rocks, colored by beautiful green tints, wound metallic threads of copper, of manganese, with traces of platinum and gold. I could not help gazing at these riches buried in the entrails of Mother Earth, and of which no man would have the enjoyment to the end of time. These treasures, mighty and inexhaustible, were buried in the morning of the earth's history at such awful depths that no crowbar or pickaxe will ever drag them from their tomb. The light of our Ruhmkorff's coil increased tenfold by the myriad of prismatic masses of rock, sent its jets of fire in every direction, and I could fancy myself traveling through a huge hollow diamond, the rays of which produced myriads of extraordinary effects. Towards 6 o'clock, this festival of light began sensibly and visibly to decrease, and soon almost ceased. The sides of the gallery assumed a crystallized tint with a somber hue. White mica began to commingle more freely with feldspar and quartz, to form what may be called the true rock, the stone which is hard above all, that supports, without being crushed, the 4 stories of the earth's soil. We were walled by an immense prison of granite. It is now 8 o'clock, and there were still no signs of water. The sufferings I endured were horrible. My uncle now kept it at the head of our little column. Nothing could induce him to stop. I, meanwhile, had but only one real thought. My ear was keenly on the watch to catch the sound of a spring, but no pleasant sound of falling water fell upon my listening ear. But at last, the time came when my limbs refused to carry me any longer. I contended heroically against the terrible tortures I endured, because I did not wish to compel my uncle to halt. To him, I knew this would be the last fatal stroke. Suddenly, I felt a deadly faintness come over me. My eyes could no longer see. My knees shook. I gave one despairing cry and fell. Help! Help! I am dying! My uncle turned and slowly retraced his steps. He looked at me with folded arms, and then allowed one sentence to escape in hollow accents from his lips. All is over. The last thing I saw was a face fearfully distorted with pain and sorrow, and then my eyes closed. When I again opened them, I saw my companions lying near me, motionless, wrapped in their huge travel rugs. Were they asleep or dead? For myself, sleep was wholly out of the question. My fainting fit over, I was wakeful as the lark. I suffered too much for sleep to visit my eyelids, the more that I thought myself sick and to dying. The last words spoke by my uncle seemed to be buzzing in my ears. All is over. And it was probable that he was right. In the state of prostration to which I was reduced, it was madness to think of ever seeing the light of day, ever again seeing the light of day. Above were miles upon miles of the earth's crust. As I thought of it, I could fancy the whole weight resting on my shoulders. I was crushed, annihilated, and exhausted myself in vain attempts to turn in my granite bed. Hours upon hours passed away. A profound and terrible silence reigned around us, a silence of the tomb. Nothing could make itself heard through these gigantic walls of granite. The very thought was stupendous. Presently, despite my apathy, despite the kind of deadly calm into which I was cast, something aroused me. It was a slight but peculiar noise. While I was watching intently, I observed that the tunnel was becoming dark. Then, gazing through the dim light that remained, I thought I saw the Icelander taking his departure, lamp in hand. Why had he acted thus? Did Hans the guide mean to abandon us? My uncle lay fast asleep or dead. I tried to cry out and arouse him. My voice, feebly issuing from my parched and fevered lips, found no echo in that fearful place. My throat was dry, my tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. The obscurity that had by this time become sense, and at last even the faint sound of the guide's footsteps was lost in the blank distance. My soul seemed to fill with anguish, and death appeared welcome. Only let it come quickly. Hans is leaving us, I cried. Hans, Hans, if you are a man, come back. These words were spoken to myself. They could not be heard aloud. Nevertheless, after the first few moments of terror were over, I was ashamed of my suspicions against a man who hitherto had behaved so admirably. Nothing in his conduct or character justified suspicion. Moreover, a moment's reflection reassured me. His departure could not be a flight. Instead of ascending the gallery, he was going deeper down into the gulf. Had he had by any bad design, his way would have been upwards. Had he had any bad design, his way would have been upwards. This reasoning calmed me a little, and I began to hope. The good and peaceful and imperturbable Hans would certainly not have arisen from his sleep without some serious and grave motive. Was he bent on a voyage of discovery? During the deep, still silence of the night, had he at last heard that sweet murmur about which we were all so anxious? Chapter 20. Water. Where is it? A bitter disappointment. During a long, weary hour, there crossed my mildly delirious brain all sorts of reasons as to what could have aroused our quiet and faithful guide. The most absurd and ridiculous ideas passed through my head, each more impossible than the other. I believed I was either half or wholly mad. Suddenly, however, there arose, as it were, from the depths of the earth, a voice of comfort. It was the sound of footsteps. Hans was returning. Presently, the uncertain light began to shine upon the walls of the passage, and then it came into view far down the sloping tunnel. At length Hans himself appeared. He approached my uncle, placed his hand upon his shoulder, and gently awakened him. My uncle, as soon as he saw who it was, instantly arose. "Well!" exclaimed the professor. "Vatten," said the hunter. I did not know a single word of the Danish language, and yet, by a sort of mysterious instinct, I knew what the guide had said. "Water! Water!" I cried, in a wild and frantic tone, clapping my hands and gesticulating like a madman. "Water!" murmured my uncle, in a voice of deep emotion and gratitude. "Hvar? Where?" "Nedat, below." Where? Below? I understood every word. I had caught the hunter by the hands, and I shook them heartily, while he looked on with perfect calmness. The preparations for our departure did not take long, and we were soon making a rapid descent into the tunnel. An hour later, we had advanced 1,000 yards and descended 2,000 feet. At this moment, I heard an accustomed and well-known sound running along the floors of the granite rock, a kind of dull and sullen roar like that of a distant waterfall. During the first half hour of our advance, not finding the discovered spring, my feelings of intense suffering appeared to return. Once more I began to lose all hope. My uncle, however, observing how downhearted I was, again took up the conversation. Hans was right, he exclaimed enthusiastically. That is the dull roaring of a torrent. A torrent, I cried, delighted at even hearing the welcome words. There's not the slightest doubt about it, he replied. A subterranean river is flowing beside us. I made no reply, but hastened on, once more animated by hope. I began not even to feel deep fatigue, which hitherto had overpowered me. The very sound of this glorious murmuring water had already refreshed me. We could hear it increasing in volume every moment. The torrent, which for a long time could be heard flowing over our heads, now ran distinctly along to the left wall, roaring, rushing, spluttering, and still falling. Several times I passed my hand across the rock, hoping to find some trace of humidity, of the slightest percolation. Alas, in vain. Again a half hour passed in the same weary toil. Again we advanced. It now became evident that the hunter, during his absence, had not been able to carry his researches any farther. Guided by an instinct peculiar to the dwellers in the mountain regions and water finders, he smelt the living spring through the rock. Still, he had not seen the precious liquid. He had neither quenched his own thirst nor brought us one drop in his gourd. Moreover, we soon made the disastrous discovery that if our progress continued, we should be soon moving away from the torrent, the sound of which gradually diminished. We turned back. Hans halted at the precise stop where the sound of the torrent appeared nearest. I could bear the suspense and suffering no longer, and seated myself against the wall, behind which I could hear the water seething and effervescing not 2 feet away, but a solid wall of granite still separated us from it. Hans looked keenly at me, and strange enough, for once I thought I saw a smile on his imperturbable face. He rose from a stone on which he had been seated and took up the lamp. I could not help but rise and follow. He moved slowly along the firm and solid granite wall. I watched him with mingled curiosity and eagerness. Presently he halted and placed his ear against a dry stone. Moving slowly along and listening with the utmost extreme care and attention, I understood at once that he was searching for the exact spot where the torrent's roar was most plainly heard. This point he found in the lateral wall on the left side, about 3 feet above the level of the tunnel floor. I was in a state of intense excitement. I scarcely dared believe what the eider duck hunter was about to do. It was, however, impossible in a moment more not to both understand and applaud, and even to smother him in my embraces, when I saw him raise the heavy crowbar and commence an attack upon the rock itself. "Saved!" I cried. "Yes!" cried my uncle, even more excited and delighted than myself. "Hans is quite right. Oh, the worthy, excellent man! We should never have thought of such an idea, and nobody else, I think, would have done so. Such a process, simple as it seemed, would most certainly not have entered our heads. Nothing could be more dangerous than to begin work with pickaxes in that particular part of the globe. Supposing while he was at work a breakup were about to take place, and supposing the torrent, once having gained an inch, were to take an L and come pouring bodily through the broken rock. Not one of these dangers were chimerical. They were only too real. But at that moment, no fear of falling in of the roof, or even an inundation was capable of stopping us. Our thirst was so intense that to quench it we would have dug below the bed of the old ocean itself. Hans went quietly to work, a work which neither my uncle nor I would have undertaken at any price. Our impatience was so great that if we had once begun with a pickaxe and crowbar, the rock would have soon split into 100 fragments. The guide, on the contrary, calm, ready, moderate, wore away at the hard rock by little steady blows of this instrument, making no attempt at a larger hole than about 6 inches. As I stood, I heard, or I thought I heard, the roar of the torrent momentarily increase in loudness, and at times I almost felt the pleasant sensation of water upon my parched lips. At the end of what appeared an age, Hans made a hole which enabled the crowbar to enter 2 feet into the solid rock. He had been at work exactly an hour. It appeared a dozen. I was getting wild with impatience. My uncle began to think of using more violent measures. I had the greatest difficulty in checking him. He had indeed just got a hold of his crowbar when a loud and welcome hiss was heard. Then a stream, or rather a jet of water, burst through the wall and came out with such force as to hit the opposite side. Hans the guide, who was half upset by the shock, was scarcely able to keep down a cry of pain and grief. I understood his meaning when, plunging my hands into the sparkling jet, I gave myself a wild and frantic cry. The water was scalding hot. Boiling, I cried in bitter disappointment. Well, never mind, said my uncle. It will soon get cool. The tunnel began to fill by clouds of vapor, while a small stream ran away into the interior of the earth. In a short time, we had some sufficiently cool to drink. We swallowed it in huge mouthfuls. Oh, what exalted delight, what rich and incomparable luxury. What was this water? Whence did it come? To us, what was that? The simple fact was, it was water, and though still with a tingle of warmth about it, it brought back to the heart that life which, but for it, must surely have faded away. I drank greedily, almost without tasting it. When, however, I had almost quenched my ravenous thirst, I made a discovery. Why, it is chalybeate water. A most excellent stomachic, replied my uncle, and highly mineralized. Here is a journey worth 20 to the spa. It's very good, I replied. I should think so. Water found 6 miles underground. There is a peculiarly inky flavor about it, which is by no means disagreeable. Hans may congratulate himself only on having made a rare discovery. What do you say, nephew, according to the usual custom of the travelers, to name the stream after him? Good, said I, and the name of Hans Bach, Hans Brook, was at once agreed upon. Hans was not a bit more proud after hearing our determination than he was before. After having taken a very small modicum of the welcome refreshment, he had looks like we got disconnected. Hello. Dang it. There we go. Looks like we had trouble again. All right. After having taken a very small modicum of the welcome refreshment, he had seated himself in a corner with his usual imperturbable gravity. Now, said I, it is not worth while letting this water run to waste. What is the use? Replied my uncle. The source from which this river rises is inexhaustible. Never mind, I continued. Let us fill our goatskins and gourds and then try to stop the opening up. My advice, after some hesitation, was followed or attempted to be followed. Hans picked up all the broken pieces of granite he had knocked out and, using some tow he happened to have about him, tried to shut up the fissure he had made in the wall. All he did was to scald his hands. The pressure was too great, and all our attempts were utter failures. It is evident, I remarked, that the upper surface of these springs is situated at a very great height above as we may fairly infer from the great pressure of the jet. That is by no means doubtful, replied my uncle. If this column of water is about 32,000 feet high, the atmospheric pressure must be something enormous. But a new idea has just struck me. And what is that? Why be it so much trouble to close this aperture? Because I hesitated and stammered, having no real reason. When our water bottles are empty, we are not at all sure what we will be able to fill them. What we shall be able to fill them, observed my uncle. I think that is very probable. Well, then, let this water run. It will, of course, naturally flow in our track and will serve to guide and refresh us. I think the idea is a good one, I cried in reply. And with this rivulet as a companion, there is no further reason why we should not succeed in our marvelous project. Ah, my boy, said the professor, laughing. After all, you are coming round. More than that, I am now confident of ultimate success. One moment, nephew of mine. Let us begin by taking some hours of repose. I had utterly forgotten that it was night. The chronometer, however, informed me of the fact. Soon we were sufficiently restored and refreshed, and had all fallen into a profound sleep.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. They got water.
They
Woo-hoo.
did get water. I wasn't sure with that title. I wasn't sure whether they were going to end up with some water or not. But
hopefully the opening doesn't get too big and end up drowning them.
Well, the next chapter is called Under the Ocean, so
yeah,
we may see something exciting.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. It's been a good journey. We're going to keep on going. We're not going to have this tomorrow night or Sunday, but we will be back Monday evening at 7 p.m. Please make sure to get on YouTube and subscribe to our channel, Mead and Mischief. If you go to bit.ly/NOL subs, null subs, or just go onto YouTube and search Mead and Mischief. Also, if you do any art this weekend or anything, I'm going to try to do some. We'll see if it happens.
It'll be fun.
Then please put it on our Facebook or Instagram or wherever.
Yeah.
We hope you guys have a wonderful week.
Yeah.
Peace out.
See you later.